What's up, YouTube world? My name is Tyler Adolfo. I am 27 years old, soon to be 28, and I have a diagnosis of bipolar type 1 disorder with psychotic features. In this video, I'm going to talk about the emotional roller coaster that is bipolar disorder. This is a condition I've lived with since approximately late October of 2021 is when I got my original diagnosis. It wasn't until February of 2022 that I started to receive treatment for a 6-month long manic episode, during which I experienced a wide array of delusions and hallucinations. After my manic episode, I had a years long, not 1 year, but like multi-year long depressive episode in the aftermath of my mania. And that was largely attributable to the fact that I was in a place of despair. I was in the absolute abyss of depression at an absolute low. And that's the thing with bipolar disorder, is it's characterized by its extremes. With the roller coaster analogy, one moment you're at the apex, you're at the highest high you could be, and then you plummet down to your absolute low, and you reach depths you once thought not possible. With bipolar disorder, you of course have mania, where you may feel euphoric, a decreased need for sleep, you talk speedily, you have flight of ideas, the whole array of symptoms, of which I've experienced all of them. Or you can be in a depressive extreme. And in a depressive episode, you might experience anhedonia, that is a lack or decline of interest in things that you would normally have an interest in. So, kind of avoidance of activities that you previously enjoyed because you just don't derive any enjoyment from them. That's how depressed you are. So anhedonia is a symptom. It's also can be characterized by oversleeping or undersleeping, overeating or undereating. In my case, when I'm depressed, I tend to oversleep and overeat, which is quite evident. But those are just some of the symptoms of depression, and like you experience fatigue as well. There's a lot that goes with that. But I bring up mania, I bring up depression, and now I would like to bring up the middle ground, the rare goal point, the target that we aspire to, those of us with bipolar disorder and those who treat it, and that is stability. We desire to be stable. I certainly do. I would say that most of my life I have been in that stable point, but I've had up and down fluctuations, ebbs and flows, where I fall into one extreme or the other. But none so as significant as the manic episode that occurred during my junior year of college, or the depressive episode that followed that 6-month long manic episode. So, when answering the question, what does bipolar disorder feel like? It's highly variable and contingent upon which mood state you find yourself in. If you are in an extremely manic, euphoric state or even experiencing psychosis, your experience of what you're feeling is going to be vastly different than if you were in the abyss of despair and experiencing overwhelming depression. And that, they're both going to be quite distinct from a place of stability, where you might demonstrate actual competency and, well, stability towards the tasks that you focus on and your responsibilities. You don't have that disruption or interference with your responsibilities caused by mania and depression when you are stable. You are able to pursue those things just like any other person would. We're really no different from other people when we're stable. It's our illness that can cause us to act out of character at times, or to act in ways that are antithetical to who we really are. First off, I will talk about mania, simply because that is where my journey with bipolar disorder began. That was the catalyst for what began my bipolar disorder treatment and all the medications that I take today. What does mania feel like? Well, love the way one of my subscribers put this on one of my videos once, and that is, mania is fun until it's not. And I cannot emphasize this enough about how terrifying mania can truly be, about how even depressing mania can be. Just because you're manic, it doesn't mean you're happy. It's possible to be depressed while you're manic too. They're not mutually exclusive, and that's what would be known as a more like a mixed episode, which I had at varying points of my 6-month manic episode. But at the early stages of my mania, I just felt productive. I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt like there was nothing beyond my intellectual grasp. And I remember I would make these little checklists, to-do lists in these little pocket notebooks, and they would have like 40 things listed for the day. And over the course of my day, I would go through most of those 40 things, sometimes all of those 40 things. Sometimes I'd have 50 things, sometimes I'd have 30 things, but it was always an amount of tasks that were beyond what I think most people would consider reasonable given the time constraint of me being a full-time college student, of me being a full-time employee at the Chamber of Commerce, and the extracurricular clubs I was involved with, including a social fraternity where I held 2 positions. I took on more than I could handle. And I think that's where the mania started to kick in. But it also was attributable to, I am a highly introverted person, and I was living in a college fraternity house. And this was taking steps vastly outside of my comfort zone. And so, while I was living in the fraternity house, I wasn't ever at that stable point because I was always outside of my comfort zone. And this isn't the fault of any particular person there. I'm very grateful for the relationships that I had in that fraternity, as short lasting as many of them were. But they were beneficial, and it was truly just the simple fact that I wasn't mentally there. I wasn't right upstairs. And because of that, it led to awkward interactions during my mania. And I remember towards the middle and later stages of my mania, I started to feel like people just didn't care about me, like people didn't believe me. And at the same time this was going on, it felt like I was this impeccable, perfect, can do no wrong individual. And I, at times, felt like everybody else had it wrong. Everyone was wrong except me. And it deeply, profoundly hurt me that nobody would believe the delusions I was expressing, the hallucinations I exhibited, the fact that people were embracing reality over my version of reality struck a chord with me in a profoundly negative way. My mania intensified rather rapidly, whereas it started off with just overwhelming myself with tasks. Pretty soon I was talking speedily, like a delusional auctioneer even. That's the way I would characterize it. Because I would rattle off 8 topics in the span of a minute. I started to neglect my sleep severely, to the point where I would go days upon days without getting any sleep at all. And I know now in hindsight that sleep is an important component of my treatment for my bipolar disorder, and it's not something I like to neglect any longer. But at the time, it felt like I didn't need it. And I had so much pent up energy. I remember on my phone, I would average anywhere from 30 to 70,000 steps in a day. There were time periods where I would have 60,000 steps 2 days in a row, followed by 5 days in a row of 25,000 steps. And I'm talking about like absurd numbers of steps. We're talking miles and miles and miles of walking a day because I was just trying to release all that built up energy that I had. And that really gets to the gist of bipolar disorder, because it's a brain disorder that affects your activity and energy and mood levels. During mania, for myself, I know it manifests on a different scale in different people, but I had unfathomable amounts of energy while operating on nominal amounts of sleep. And you could see that effect in the people around me and the way that people reacted to me. So in February of 2022, I began treatment at a partial hospital program for my bipolar disorder, and the first medication I was put on was Abilify. Abilify pulled me out of the depths of mania very quickly. Before I knew it, I was no longer in mania. And then the depression hit. And that brings us to, what does depression feel like? Now, that intersection where I leave mania and enter depression is so critical. That moment, I experienced intense amounts of shame, doubt, guilt, fear, uncertainty, and so much more. And as a result of these feelings, I retreated socially. I isolated myself to the confines of my bedroom. The only times I would leave the apartment were to go to medical appointments. And eventually, as I got better, I would then incorporate visiting family every now and then. But even then, I still felt very out of place. I felt like the whole world knew about my manic episode. And that is because during my manic episode, I was posting sporadically to my social media accounts on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter. And it led to this, delusional belief, even during my depressive episode, that everybody knew. And I had this fear when going outside that, oh, this person might know about my manic episode, or that person might know. And I also remember having a phobia at the time of crossing the street, and this just goes to show how impacted my psyche and train of rational thought actually was. They say mania can cause brain damage. That's widely studied, reported. It has scientific backing. I was afraid to cross the street because of one incident where I almost got hit by a car while crossing the street. Since then, I became afraid of crossing the street, and that lasted years. It lasted an incredibly long time. There was nothing ephemeral about it. I wish it would have been short lasting. I wish it would have never arose at all, but it did. It rose, it was there, it affected me. During my depressive episode, I greatly questioned my self-worth. There were plenty of moments where I questioned about why I woke up in the morning. What's my why? What's my purpose now? And one thing I do give myself credit for, whereas I feel like many others will kind of absolve themselves from faith in the aftermath of a significant trauma, I kind of become closer to God during my dark chapters. And during my depressive episode, I did pray a decent amount, more than I do when I'm stable. And that's because at so many moments I felt hopeless, so hopeless that I believed that a higher power's action and investment was necessary in order to get me back on a positive trajectory. It took a long time to get some positive momentum and be back on that positive trajectory. I thought that I would never work again. I thought that I would never go to school again. I thought that I would never have relationships like I did once before, and to an extent that aspect is actually quite true even to this day. I'm 27 years old. I don't really have any friendships that I can point to. But on the school front and job front, I turned out to be wrong. Not only did I get a job and manage to work it for about 7 months, I got 2 promotions over the course of that tenure, and I was a shift lead manager at the time that I left that company. And I was able to apply to go to college again. And I got accepted to a university despite the circumstances which got me expelled from my previous one, which in itself was a huge source of depression. And during my depressive episode, I assiduously worked on trying to get that expulsion overturned, and I failed miserably. But I believe that things worked out for the better because I got accepted to a new university, one that's closer to home, one that's understanding and accepting of what I went through and does not project blame onto me for something that was beyond my control, and that was truly a medical episode. I feel like sometimes things are meant not to work out because then they work out in other ways, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me. God works in mysterious and unpredictable ways, and I do believe that He continues to work in my life, and I believe that He continues to work in your life. So I've talked about what it feels like, what bipolar disorder feels like in the stage of mania, in the stage of depression. Now I want to talk about stability. More specifically, I want to highlight examples of when I was stable and achieved monumental success. The first thing that comes to mind is high school. During my junior and senior years, I involved myself in a wide array of extracurricular activities, mock trial, speech competition, DECA competition for the category of business finance. And on the mock trial front, I remember joining the team, and for the first time in our team's history, we swept our division and made it to the playoffs. We were undefeated in our division, and first time in history, we made it to the playoffs. That was a moment of pride, and I was, for the most part, stable at the time, or stable-ish, might be putting it more accurately, but I certainly wasn't super manic. I wasn't in a hardcore depressive state, although I did have my depressive moments over the course of those school years. I was able to enter the Lions Club youth speech competition, and I won first place at the club, zone, district, and regional levels, and qualified as just one of 5 state finalists. This competition began with 900 student speakers, and I was one of the final 5, and I ended up not getting first in the state finals, and that's okay. It was a highly beneficial experience. I was able to win some monetary prizes while talking about a topic I'm passionate about, integrity. And I actually have a speech of my performance at the state finals. It's the second video on my channel. If you want to take a look, just go to my YouTube videos section, filter by oldest, and then check out Lions Club Youth Speech Competition State Finals 2019, if you're interested in taking a look at that. When I was stable, I participated in Distributive Educational Clubs of America. My category was business finance. In my first and only year of doing DECA, I achieved first place at District 7 in Massachusetts. I went on to the state finals, where I achieved first place in the state conference for business finance. I then qualified for ICDC, which is the International Career Development Conference, and was able to partake in that. And I didn't win first that time, but if I had a second year of doing DECA, I promise you I would have won first. I would have at the very least had like a top 3 placement or 2, but I didn't discover DECA to my later years, and that's okay. I'm very proud of the success I did have during my time in the program. Stability went on into college. My first 2 years were truly impeccable. I had excellent marks in all my classes. I made the highly competitive University of Massachusetts Amherst mock trial team. I think around 90 something people tried out. And mind you, these are smart people who were on, most of them were on mock trial teams of their own in high school. Or I was one of just, I think, 26 people to make it onto this highly competitive mock trial team, and we won our first tournament of the year. And eventually the pandemic started, and we were all sent home, and that kind of came to an end because I didn't feel like investing into the online version of mock trial. It didn't feel the same to me. But in each of these moments where I wasn't experiencing extreme depression, I wasn't experiencing extreme mania, but I was experiencing a degree of middle ground. And in that middle ground, I was able to thrive. I was able to feel like I was alive, to feel like I was normal, to feel like I had the competency and that I had the ability. Insofar as I applied my willpower and never surrendered hope, it was within my means to achieve monumental success, and that's exactly what I did time after time after time. And right now, I would say I'm kind of in the moderate depression area because I'm taking a break from school again. I took a 4-year break from university, applied to go to college, got in, attended a semester, got my credits, but I'm going to be taking next spring off. So I'm already taking a break again, and it does feel challenging in my mind that I'm doing that. It does feel like a bane, a burden, because I want to get my degree done. I want my mom to be able to see me graduate college, and it just seems like it's more and more unlikely as time goes on. Because here I am taking yet another break, and I'm in a partial program to work on facilitating my movement back into a stable state because I have, as I mentioned, felt moderately depressed in the wake of this semester back to college not going as well as I had planned. And so I'm going to complete this program, hopefully get back on track, and get back on a positive trajectory again. But even in recent days, I've already taken some proactive action. I've executed some steps that are moving me in the direction I need to be going, and that is I've been reading. I've been getting some steps in outside, and I got to work on increasing that, and I got to work on not overeating. But the point is, I'm making some positive steps, and I've always mentioned how small steps do add up to become big steps. So in this video, in conclusion, we talked about what it feels like to be manic, what it feels like to be depressed, and what it feels like to be stable, all as it pertains to bipolar disorder. I, of course, am speaking from the perspective of someone with bipolar type 1 with psychotic features. Bipolar manifests differently in everyone. There's people who will attest to the very end that, hey, mania is so much fun, and I would rather be in mania. And I'm not passing judgment on those people. I'm just saying that it's not compatible with the experience that I went through. The experience that I went through was anything but fun. It was a living nightmare, thinking that government agents were after me, that people were out to get me, having nobody believe me that that was going on, that my house was wiretapped, having phone calls in my backyard with people that didn't exist, barricading myself in my frat room because I thought my frat brothers would come after me. There were so many downsides to my mania. And going into the depressive side of things, I feel like the depression can be in many ways just as destructive as the mania, but in its own way. Both the mania and depression take their toll on your psyche, on your mental. It certainly was the case for me. There were many moments during my mania and depression where I felt like I didn't want to be alive anymore, where I had moved in that direction of surrendering hope, even though in the back of my mind is this idea that we should never surrender hope, and that with the grand architect of the universe at our side, we should rest safe with the knowledge that we all have a purpose in this world. We all stand to make a positive difference in this world. We should accept as many opportunities as we can within reason, without sacrifice of our own mental well-being, to try and make a positive impact on the world, to make a positive impact on the people around us, to whatever extent possible, within reason. And that would be my advice. That's my perspective on the experiences I've went through with bipolar disorder thus far. I have many more years of life, hopefully, where I'll get to experience this roller coaster of emotions even more and have more perspectives and more stories to share with you. But that's it for this video. Please hit that subscribe button if you're new. If you like the video, hit the like button. And if you have any questions or comments, leave it down in the comment below. Thank you so much. Love, light, and tranquility to all.